What's up guys, Houndish here, and today I wanted to talk about one of my favourite abilities in the game, and one which I think personally goes a little under the radar given how powerful it can be in PvE content, and I'm talking about Fletchette Storm. And so this is a Titan Strand ability which was added in Season of the Deep, I believe, and it's something that I've been using non-stop since it came out, because it's great for killing large groups of enemies or putting significant amounts of damage into tanky targets, as you can see in the gameplay. And there are ways to set it up which boosts damage, ties in with Strand subclasses, and has incredibly high uptime with the right build. So there are ways to set this up that allow us to keep throwing these barrages of high damage Strand projectiles over and over again. And in the Titan subclass, I see a lot of folks run Banner of War and Into the Fray, and of course, it is incredibly strong, but I do think there is a lot of missed potential with Fletchette Storm, so let's talk about a fun way to set it up. As you can see in the gameplay, Fletchette Storm is a pretty capable ability, and while sliding we can activate our charged melee ability to leap into the air, and this knocks nearby targets back and deals damage. But then when airborne we can activate the charged melee again to launch a cluster of damaging unraveling projectiles, and we can repeatedly activate this melee to chain additional throws. And so of course we get 2 melee charges with this class, and when using one charge we get a short long range burst, but with 2 full charges, it almost turns into like a mini super, and as we pointed out, the damage that this deals is no joke. It could be a legitimate part of your boss DPS, it can also nuke champions, tanky targets, or can be used on entire groups of enemies. And with this, we're also using Banner of War, which pretty much synergizes immediately, and we can defeat a target with a melee attack, finisher, or sword to raise the Banner of War, and that periodically heals us and nearby allies, increasing melee and sword damage. And of course, targets defeated by us and nearby allies charge the banner, which increases the speed of its pulses. And so while we're throwing out this ranged melee, we're triggering Banner of War, and that helps with survivability given the healing capability, but it also boosts the damage of Fletchette Storm itself. And so that contributes to some of these really high damage barrages that you can see here. But on top of that, in the subclass, we're running Thread of Fury, where damaging targets with a tangle grants melee energy. This is an obvious boost to our Fletchette uptime. Plus we've got Thread of Continuity, where Suspend, Unravel, and Sever effects have increased duration. And then Thread of Warding, where picking up an Orb of Power grants Woven Mail, and we can take advantage of that in the build since we're using Armor Charge. We'll touch on that in a moment. Because of course, Woven Mail grants us additional damage reduction. But on top of that, I think it might be worth running Thread of Isolation, where landing rapid precision hits emits a severing burst from the target. And so by throwing the ranged melee, we're putting out a ton of damage, triggering and utilizing Banner of War's bonus damage. And then when we throw tangles, we get melee energy, and defeating suspended targets gives us an Orb of Power, which also grants Woven Mail. And so this is really strong, but if we go ahead and build into melee energy, we can have Fletchette Storm available a lot. So that really is one of the main focuses of this setup. And you'll have noticed we're using Monte Carlo, which is a huge boost here, as dealing damage with the weapon reduces melee cooldown and grants a chance to fully charge melee abilities with each kill. But on top of that, when we use our melee or Fletchette Storm, we're boosting the damage of Monte Carlo. So you'll see in a lot of the clips we're using the ability and rapidly recharging it with Monte Carlo, which is a significant part of how we're getting Fletchette Storm up so often. But I've also opted to run a shotgun with Pugilist, and since we have to slide to activate Fletchette Storm, shotguns can be a nice option given the movement modes we're already utilizing. And of course, Pugilist allows shotgun kills to grant melee energy. This Mindbender's Ambition in particular has Pugilist and Incandescent, so where we're making any Scourge kills, which will happen a lot on groups of minor enemies, of course those kills are also feeding back some melee energy, which is great. So we're kind of swapping between Monte Carlo and the shotgun, both of which are giving us significant amounts of melee energy. But there is more to it if we want to throw Storm over and over again, just like we are in this footage. And yes, we're running some solo deep dives, blind well, strikes, and coil right here, which is all standard content, right? It's the relatively easy content in the game. But that's where this build shines as an all-out slaying setup. It literally chews through these standard PvE modes like nothing, especially because we can easily kill a lot of stuff to get our abilities charged. So it's really great in normal content, but it can also hold its own in harder content like raids, dungeons, and solo lost sectors. As you can see here, we're literally emptying the boss room in the 1830 lost sector, and Fletchette Storm is the primary thing doing that. Plus, given that we have overload autos, if you're running Monte Carlo, it is a solid option for some of the harder content in the game this season, so it isn't a one-trick pony by any means. Not least because Because we're rocking Syntheseps, and when we're surrounded, we gain increased melee and super damage, as well as improved weapon handling and reload speed. And the great thing for Fletchette Storm is that the buff from Synthos affects its ranged damage, so while Synthos may proc on nearby enemies, while it's active, if we go ahead and throw a fully double-charged barrage of Fletchette Storm at a boss 30 meters away, that's also benefiting from the damage boost from Syntheseps. So considering that's also buffing the super, and we know how strong the Titan super is on Strand, Syntheseps are a win-win in this situation. But on our gauntlets, we're running a mod called Font of Vigor, and we gain a bonus to strength while we have an armor charge, and the armor charge decays over time. On top of that though, we've actually paired it with melee kickstart, and when your melee energy is fully expended, your armor charge is consumed and you gain melee energy for each armor charge used. It may be a little bit odd to run both of these together, but we are able to produce so many orbs of power that we can have armor charge active the vast majority of the time, and if you aren't killing stuff, Font of Vigor decreases the melee cooldown. And then when we are killing stuff, we're triggering melee kickstart and getting a full melee charge back. So depending on whether we're using abilities or weapons to do damage, they can both work as long as we produce enough orbs. But keep in mind, we did use Thread of Warding, where picking up an orb of power grants Woven Mail, so these are working together with no real effort put in. Then additionally, we're running stacks on the legs, where picking up an orb of power grants one additional stack of armor charge. And this is paired with 2 invigoration mods, which reduces melee cooldown each time you pick up an orb of power. And so that's also helping us to get our melee energy back very quickly. And then our class item, where we have 3 powerful attraction mods, and this automatically collects nearby orbs of power when we activate our class ability. So orbs are coming from our weapon and abilities here, and as you can see, I'm often dropping the barricade, which is picking up those orbs, and we're getting a big bump to our melee energy. On top of that though, we've got mods like Hands On, where we get bonus super energy on melee kills, so not only are we able to use Fletchette Storm a ridiculous amount, but we're also getting more supers. And so overall, in the grand scheme of things, melees are getting buffed significantly. Fletchette Storm is already stupidly strong, but of course we've got it available a considerable amount. Then we're getting orbs of power, which reduce that cooldown again. Those are also granting Woven Mail, and Banner of War is essentially always active. But at the same time, we're getting loads of super energy, and both the super and melees are buffed by Syntheseps, so we've become a total killing machine. And again, I think the appeal here is that Fletchette Storm deals monstrous amounts of damage considering the type of ability that it is, especially with those damage buffs active, and being able to trigger so many other strong bonuses like Woven Mail and Banner of War at the same time seems borderline unfair. And as I said at the start, I think this is quite underrated. So hopefully some of that gameplay speaks for itself. Some folks will say that this won't be good for GMs or master raids, and yes, there will always be other builds which are more suited to particular hard content in the game. But I think this is another slept-on option that'll make sense in some activities depending on modifiers, and while it can hold its own in tougher modes, it can also absolutely decimate any of the run-of-the-mill modes in the game. So it's something that can work all of the time, which is another big component of why I think it's a fun setup to use. And while I've been running this one for a while, I do have to say a big thanks to my friend Duddits for suggesting the build itself. You can check out his awesome build content on YouTube linked below. But for today, let us know if you've been using Fletchette Storm in the comment section below, or any reasons that you think other choices are better for Strand Titans. I'd love to get your opinions in the comments section, but for today, that is the video. So as always, I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and if you have, a rating below very much helps us out on the channel. Also be sure to get subscribed if you do want to see more Destiny content, but otherwise I hope you've enjoyed the video, and whatever you get up to, I hope you guys have an awesome day.